The loss of an American family in Mexico, and I want heads on pikes. No, that's not a metaphor. I actually want heads on pikes. Donald Trump in rally mode, the best Donald Trump. We've got some great clips of that and some analysis of it. And finally, more Epstein cover up. And boy, just how gross can the American media get? All that's coming up right now on I'm Right. There was this thing called the wheel, broken on the wheel, the torture wheel. Just think back to, 16, 1700s. They would take a criminal, oftentimes a robber, a highway robber. They would strap him down to a board or steps somewhere or whatever else. Sometimes they would actually strap him to the wheel. It was done a million different ways. Now, stay with me. This is going to get a little ugly, but I actually have a purpose for this. They would strap this person down. They would then take a wheel or the blunt end of an axe and begin to smash all of this person's bones. Oftentimes, they would start at the shins, then they would work their way up the legs, the arms, so on and so forth. An ugly, horrible way to go. When all the bones were broken, oftentimes, and I realize this is gruesome, they would loop the shattered limbs through a wheel, set the person up, and then sometimes they'd set him on fire. Sometimes they'd cut his head off. Sometimes after doing these things, they'd leave the wheel up. Now, yes, that's horrible to think about. It's ugly. It's a brutal form of capital punishment. But there was a purpose to it. Because you see, they didn't just do these things to a criminal. It was a public event. It wasn't just something, you and your buddies would go to. Hey, let's grab a beer and go watch somebody get his limbs smashed. This was a family affair, ladies and gentlemen. This was something that you would bring your kids to, and not only did you bring your kids to it, it was expected of you. Well, yes, let's gather up the family. There's an execution today. Picture that in your mind. Thinking about your little Timmy, let's gather up the kids in the minivan and go watch somebody be brutally executed. Hard to imagine, right? Why would they ever do something? What kind of sick freaks? Do you know why they did something that way? And it was widely practiced. Several nations did it. You know why? Because it was a deterrent to others. Think about the impression that would leave on a young mind watching that happen. On not just a young mind, young, middle-aged, old. You watch somebody go through something like that. Do you think maybe that leaves an impression with you? Do you think maybe if you're thinking about straying off the straight and narrow, you would adjust your thinking? Maybe, you know what? I actually think I'll just be a blacksmith instead. A highway robber doesn't actually look like it's for me, and now that I see that man getting his head chopped off while looped through a wheel. Well, why am I talking about this? Well, there was a family, Mormon family. They lived in a Mormon community in Sonora, Mexico. The LeBaron family. We're not going to show you their pictures. We're not sure exactly at this time who passed away, who didn't. There's conflicting reports, but the bottom line is 3 women and 6 children were killed by Mexican drug cartels. SUV was burnt up, and when I say children, I'm talking twin 6-month-olds, a 4-year-old. It's difficult to imagine that kind of horror. And Mexican cartels gunned these people down. From what I understand, it was allegedly probably a case of mistaken identity. Whatever the case may be, whatever the reasons behind it, somebody needs to be made an example of for this. And this is why I say this. It's not about revenge. I'm not talking about revenging the LeBaron family. I didn't wake up this morning and read it and think to myself, good, we've got to go down there and get revenge. Let's go all Punisher on them. No. In the same way that ancient Roman citizens were protected all around the world because they were Roman citizens, this is about the other citizens of the United States of America all over the world. It should mean something to be a U.S. citizen. When somebody's thinking about harming a U.S. citizen, they should have a moment of pause and think to themselves, oh man, this is probably not a good idea, because the wrath of God will come down on me if I harm this person. President Trump stepped right up, by the way, to his credit. He came out with a statement. He said, a wonderful family and friends from Utah got caught between two vicious drug cartels who were shooting at each other, with the result being many great American people killed, including young children and some missing. If Mexico needs or requests help in cleaning out these monsters, the United States of America stands ready, willing, and able to get involved and do the job quickly and effectively. The great new president of Mexico has made this a big issue, but the cartels have become so large and powerful that sometimes you need an army to defeat an army. Well, while I understand the president defending the president of Mexico, Obrador, the president of Mexico, Obrador, quickly came out and said, no. We don't need any of that help. We actually need more social programs in response to the cartel, not violence. I'm not making that up. That's what he said, social programs. That's fine. You can have your social programs. You run Mexico the way you want to run Mexico. It's not my business. I don't really care. It's not my country. But what is my business is the lives of American citizens around the globe. They should be protected, and somebody in Mexico needs to pay with their lives for what happened to that sweet young family. Again, it's not about revenge. It's not even about justice. This is about protecting the lives of American citizens across the globe. So the next time a couple cartel gunmen, couple drug dealers in Singapore, wherever it may be, the next time somebody goes and wants to go popping off with a machine gun, they have to have a moment where they say, I hope there aren't any American citizens here because I don't want to die tomorrow. I understand that that is harsh, but let me clarify again, this is not your mommy's show. This is my show where we speak the truth around here. And that's what I think should be done. Now, we have a resident expert on the cartels. I'm sure he's generally a more reasonable person than I, and he certainly is the most informed person I've ever known on the cartels and what's happening down there and how something like this would happen. So I'm very, very excited to cut this a little bit short tonight so we can go to Brandon Darby with Breitbart.com. I highly recommend you read his Cartel Chronicles stuff. Now, all that torture wheel, heads on a pike stuff may have made you uncomfortable, but I'm right. We got Brandon Darby coming up in just a second. American family members are dead in Sonora, Mexico. To talk about that, we're going to bring on our cartel expert, or let's be honest about it, as much as it pains me to give him compliments. He is the cartel expert, and as I've told you before, the guy should win a Pulitzer or Pulitzer, depending on where you went to school, for his work on the cartels. Bring in Breitbart.com's Brandon Darby now. Brandon, before we get to the actual attack here, I have this theory. You're going to hate my theory because you're reasonable, that I want somebody to die for this. And it's not a revenge thing. It's not even if it was mistaken identity, which I'm guessing it probably was. I think it sets a dangerous precedent, whether it be Mexico or Antarctica, that American citizens can just be slaughtered and there not be a public response showing the rest of the world American citizens are hands-off people.
I agree with you. I think that people will die for it. I think the most likely scenario is that a few people if indeed it was the Sinaloa cartel and the Jaguars, which is what Mexico is saying it likely was. I think that what they'll do is they'll take a few people, they'll say they're responsible for it, they'll kill them and be like, hey, look, we handled it ourselves, back off Mexico, back off USA. And sadly, I think Mexico will play ball with that. And I think that the U.S. State Department in Mexico will largely accept that as well. We've seen this before when U.S. citizens have gotten killed, and I think that we'll probably see that again.
Explain to me, I mean, obviously you break this stuff down really well. I understand the Sinaloa cartel is the more elder statesman cartel in Mexico from what you've told us before in the past, more run like a business, less prone to violence because they want the heat off. They have long-term goals. All these different cartels are down there. Now, this is the first time I've heard the word Jaguars. Who are these people? What are the Jaguars?
Well, okay, so the Sinaloa cartel is really a more accurate way to say it would be there's the Sinaloa cartel and then there's the Sinaloa Federation. So most of what we call the Sinaloa cartel is really hundreds of different regional crime groups and criminal organizations who operate under the banner of the Sinaloa Federation. So they operate under the leadership or in alignment with the Sinaloa cartel, but they're really not the Sinaloa cartel. So in that area of Mexico, south of New Mexico, there's been a lot of gunfights lately, and all of those gunfights have been the Sinaloa Federation fighting the Sinaloa Federation. So what you have is different regional groups who operate under the banner of the Sinaloa, fighting each other for territory and power. You've had that in Arizona for a very long time now. There's been Los Mimos, which is a Sinaloa Federation or Sinaloa cartel. And then there's been Los Salazar, which is also the Sinaloa cartel, but they're two different criminal groups fighting each other. And so one of the problems right now with what just happened is we can't tell if it was two Sinaloa groups fighting each other and then they accidentally targeted this convoy with the family, or if it was two Sinaloa groups fighting each other and then another cartel like the Juarez cartel or Jalisco came in and did something like this in order to bring heat down on the Sinaloa cartel. We can't tell right now. That happens too. They call it calendar la plaza. It's like heating up the plaza, where another cartel will go into another cartel's territory and do something like kill a journalist, kill a politician, kill a U.S. citizen, in hopes that it makes that cartel look bad, causes the government to crush that cartel under U.S. pressure, and then they can come in after the fact and take over.
Before we get back to that U.S. pressure things, I want to talk about that. Can we talk about briefly what this family was doing there? I mean, a lot of people woke up this morning and for the first time they realized, wait a minute, there's a Mormon community of American citizens in northern Mexico. What are they doing there? What are they doing there? Why in the world would a Mormon family set up shop in, frankly, such an obviously dangerous region to begin with?
Well, okay, so many years ago, you know, the Church of Latter-day Saints spread out across the continent, and at different times their policies changed. Specifically, I think with that community, initially the policies were over polygamy. When the Mormon Church said no more polygamy, a bunch of Mormon communities said, well, that's for you. That's what you say, but we're still Mormons and we're not going to listen to you. So even today, I get tons of emails from people who are in the Church of Latter-day Saints, and they're like, hey, you need to correct your story. Those people aren't Mormon. And I'm like, well, there's a lot of money gospel people who I would like to say, hey, quit calling those people Christian, but I can't do that because they are Christian, right? These people are Mormons. So there's a massive thriving Mormon community. Some of those in Mexico, some of those communities are separated from the Church of Latter-day Saints. Some of them are not, but they're still Mormons. At least they identify as Mormons. The government identifies them as Mormons. Media identifies them as Mormons. And pretty much everyone except for the PR people in the Church of Latter-day Saints calls them Mormons.
Okay, so I think we probably have unpacked that about as much as I need to. I understand that gets confusing, and I just wanted you to clarify that for people. That's the reason they're down there. Back to what you said just a couple minutes ago about this could be the Sinaloa Federation fighting the Sinaloa Federation. Help me understand that. If there's some gigantic, all-powerful, well, not all-powerful, but extremely powerful head of the Sinaloa Federation, in what world would they allow their underlings or people who work underneath them to fight with each other? Isn't the point of being in the Federation so we can all share a little of this, share a little of that? It's more peaceful and profitable for everybody?
One would think that, but it's not the case. So like one of the most, I would say, dangerous cartels in Mexico emerging is Cartel Jalisco, whatever, just say Jalisco cartel. But the Jalisco cartel used to be part of the Sinaloa Federation. And then they decided to break away. And they decided to break away and challenge the Sinaloa cartel for dominance in Mexico. So I think with the Sinaloa cartel, El Chapo's folks in Culiacan, I think that they probably are less likely to try to reprimand factions that are fighting each other that are still loyal to them, because they don't want those factions to go to Jalisco and align with Jalisco. So it's a tricky business, but folks just need to understand that most of the U.S.-Mexico border is actually controlled by the Sinaloa cartel, but it's really many different criminal organizations who we all call Sinaloa, but really they're their own criminal organizations with their own personalities and what have you.
Tell me about this Mexican president Obrador. I mean, everybody saw Donald Trump's tweets this morning talking about, you know, if we have a military response ready if we have to. Obrador comes right out and says violence is not the answer. I mean, he's talking about social programs for the cartel, which have people like me just about ready to explode. But is there stuff going on behind the scenes? Will we actually do something with them? And he just has to say this publicly. How do the politics of all this work?
No, we're actually not going to do anything different with him. AMLO, they call him AMLO. He's really liberal, and that's how he looks at the world. He thinks if you just try to reason with people and provide them some basic needs, that all the bad things will go away. Obviously, people like you and I know that there are just some people who are evil, and the only thing they understand is to like get incarcerated or get killed. Whether we're talking about ISIS or whatever we're talking about, there's some truth. I mean, whether we're talking about ISIS or whether we're talking about cartels, it is true that if there's not economic opportunities, that bad people prey upon young men in those situations. That's true. Ultimately, there is going to have to be more economic opportunities in Mexico. Part of a long-term strategic plan to deal with cartels is, in fact, economic development, but that doesn't change what we're dealing with right now. Just like with ISIS, just trying to provide jobs and do something better, they would actually prevent that from occurring. So there does have to be that forceful response. There does have to be, they do have to be eradicated, and they do have to be eradicated with force and by force. And that is not something that AMLO is going to do. He's done everything as a president to back his government away from that. Under AMLO, this is, when we saw El Chapo's son get arrested and taken, AMLO released them because of threats by the cartel. He allowed Mexico's military to get, for lack of a better word, to get bitched by the cartel. And that's who the guy is. That's how he sees things. What to do with that in Mexico, they say, hey, ever since we've been going after the cartels, we've seen increasing levels of violence. Maybe if we just leave them alone and accept that we're a narco state, let them have territory, maybe we'll have less violence. And you and I, as American citizens, especially as Texans, we can't comprehend that type of bending over. But when you live in a society where, for the last 100 years, you've been oppressed and conquered by someone, where you don't have the Second Amendment, where you don't have all the freedoms we have in the U.S. that are enshrined in documentation, I guess you don't have the same brazen attitude that we have about our rights or about our communities. So it's a sad situation, but I don't think cartel violence and cartel control is going to decrease under the current Mexican president at all. What we might see is some cartels decrease in power while others increase in power because he uses his government to help those cartels and not the others. But we're definitely not going to see a decrease in the power of these narcotics organizations.
Brandon Darby, I have to be honest, my friend. I enjoy talking to you. I love having you on, but I'm very worried that 10 years from now, you and I are going to be doing the same interview, talking about the same problems, and nothing's going to change because nothing ever seems to change. But keep doing what you do, my friend. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Brandon Darby, Cartel Chronicles. Go find his stuff at Breitbart.com. Coming right back, we are going to have the Trump rally, a couple video bits from the Trump rally, and then you get to hear my brilliance as I opine on them. Hang on. Donald Trump in rally mode. Let's be honest, that is the best Donald Trump. When he's at a rally, he is in his element. I have personally witnessed one of these campaign rallies when he came to Houston. He gets up there and he just talks for an hour and a half, 2 hours. When he was at CPAC, the man is in his element. There are some people who are very comfortable in a crowd. There are some people who are not. And believe it or not, not all politicians are comfortable with it. Not all musicians are comfortable with it. There is a different mentality it takes to stand up on a stage with 10, 20, 30,000 people staring at you and to enjoy that. Some people look out, they get intimidated. Some people look out and they think, yeah, this is where I belong. And love Donald Trump or hate Donald Trump, when he gets on that stage, you can see it. It's written all over his face. He knows how to work a crowd. He's genuinely enjoying being there. It almost looks like he's free from the normal day-to-day obligations of the Oval Office, and he can just go out and be himself and get the crowd rallied up and attack the media and everything. Well, he was in Lexington, Kentucky last night, and he started blasting away. Now, I want you to pay attention to something. We're going to play you some video clips of it. Pay attention to the major points that Trump starts hitting on these rallies. Yes, he's always going to go back to his bread and butter things that he knows his base loves, things like immigration. But he's really going to hit some high points, and what it's doing is it's giving you a preview of how he's going to campaign against the eventual Democrat nominee. Unsurprisingly, he's campaigning on the strength of the stock market. Here was his first.
Your 401ks, how you doing? Pretty good, right? Pretty good. People tell me that their wives, their husbands, all of a sudden they've been running the 401ks for years, and they totally lost respect for, let's say, the husband. Totally lost respect. Now they think he's a financial genius because he's up 74%. She says, darling, I love you. You are the most incredible, brilliant financial mind. And you know what? If the Democrats get in, that's not going down by 50%. That's going down to nothing. It's going to be worthless. It's going to be worthless. You'll have a depression the likes of which you've never seen.
Okay, one, that story about the wife thinking the husband is a financial genius, that's actually pretty funny, and you know that's happened. But two, it's easy to say, he's at a campaign rally and that's hyperbole. And obviously some things he says are hyperbole. But saying the Democrats will wipe out the stock market, it would be easy to say even last week, well, maybe that's a little too far. I don't think so. Maybe it'll get hurt. Did you see Elizabeth Warren's Medicare for All proposal? $52 trillion with a T. Endless new taxes on employers and everybody else. That would wipe out the stock market. Can you imagine the havoc that would wreak on the economy? And that is why I've always been cautioning you. You see all these poll numbers. They're always taking polls now. Joe Biden's up by 20 on Donald Trump. Donald Trump loses to every candidate. Donald Trump loses to Elizabeth Warren. And I've told you all, that doesn't matter now. None of that matters now. And you know why none of that matters? Because there's not a Democrat Donald Trump is running against yet. He's running against a concept. He's running against the field. What do you say every single Saturday or Sunday when you're watching your favorite college football or NFL team? What do you say? You're yelling at the coach. I do it. You do it. We all do. How could he call that play? What an idiot. He should have totally run left instead of run right. What's he thinking? Why do we do that? Because it's easy to take shots at the head man. It's easy to sit and take little chirp shots at the president. Everything that goes wrong in your life is the president's fault. I ran into a pothole today. That's stinking Trump. I didn't get that promotion I wanted. Well, maybe if Donald Trump wasn't there. It's easy to do that, to fixate on the head man and do that. But what you're going to have in 2020, love Donald Trump or hate Donald Trump, is you are going to have a clear contrast. Right now, that contrast looks like it's going to be Elizabeth Warren. So yes, she may have spent the last 3 or 4 years, Trump this and Trump. I don't like Trump's tweets. Well, that was pretty vulgar. Why would Trump say something like that? Oh, you know what? I wish things were just calm. I wish we went back to normal. It's easy to say all those things now. But when you go to the ballot box next November and you're staring there looking at the choices, and you have to choose between Trump's tweets or a $52 trillion wipeout of the stock market, we all know what you're going to choose. It's the same thing I'm going to choose. What's that number that Selena Zito always quotes to us? They have polled it. 34% of the people who voted for Donald Trump in the last election did not tell family and friends they voted for Donald Trump. Because you know the endless media barrage. He's a Nazi. He's Adolf Hitler. What's wrong with all of you? So people were just like, okay, they just don't want to deal with it. You just shut up, slide into the voting booth, boop, check Trump, go on out and lie your face off. Do you think that 34% number is going to go down or up after the last 3 years of media coverage? Yeah, that number is going to go up. You're not changing people's minds. You're just quieting them. Then when they say silent majority, you know, everybody says that word, silent majority, this and that. They mean it. All you've done is drive Donald Trump voters underground. They haven't changed their minds. So it's easy to take shots at the president now. When the time comes and you're comparing your 401k, the job market, record low unemployment out there, you're comparing that to what will happen if Elizabeth Warren actually were to ever take the presidency. We all know which way that goes, people. Well, he didn't stop at Democrats in the stock market. He chose to single out Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi and the conditions around her district, which aren't that good.
What's happened to San Francisco and what's happened to so many other places run by the radical left Democrats, it's unbelievable. Los Angeles. You take a look at Los Angeles. Looks like a third world city. But go back to Nancy's area, look at what's happened. There's been no place in the country that's gone down like the area that Nancy Pelosi represents.
The media hates when he does that, and here's why. He brings attention to maybe the most undertold. I'm not sure if that's a word, but I went to community college, and it's my show, so it's a word now. The most undertold story in the United States of America. It is the horrible condition of all the liberal-run cities. If this were a Republican trend, if all the major urban areas in the United States of America were crime, poverty-ridden, drug-ridden, homeless-ridden dumps, if they were all Republican-run, you would have media story after media story after media story. What are they doing wrong? What are the conditions that brought this about? This is Republican rule. Maybe it's time for a change. You don't ever get those stories now. Yeah, you may get a story about the homeless problem in Los Angeles, but you never get it from the, why is that perspective? Because the media knows Democrat-run urban areas turn into dumps. You cannot put into words how wonderful and beautiful the city of San Francisco is at its peak. Right there on the bay like that. You've even seen it in the movies if you've never been there. The fog, the rolling hills. It's one of the best food cities, or at least it was one of the best food cities in America. And let's be honest, that's appealing to yours truly. Now, there's poop running down the streets. I'm not being vulgar. That's the truth. You have to watch out that you don't trip on heroin needles when you walk up the sidewalks. It is turned into an absolute dump. And nobody in the mainstream press wants to look around and say, why? How did this happen? You don't see this in Republican-run cities. But Democrat city after Democrat city, they are going down the tubes. And at some point in time, the media is going to be forced to cover this thing. Now, obviously, because they're in Lexington, Kentucky, you see this at every Trump rally. He gathers the state Republicans there, the powerful Republicans in the state. He always brings them up on the stage with him to try to give them a boost. So if you're in Kentucky, what are you going to do? You're going to bring up Rand Paul. You're going to bring up the governor, give Mitch McConnell a shout out, do all these things. Rand Paul came up on stage, and he had a little something to say about the whistleblower and the Trump impeachment Ukraine fiasco. Here was Rand.
Hunter Biden made $50,000 a month. That's the definition of corruption. We know he got it only because of his family connections. We also now know the name of the whistleblower. The whistleblower needs to come before Congress as a material witness because he worked for Joe Biden at the same time Hunter Biden was getting money from corrupt oligarchs. I say tonight to the media, do your job and print his name.
That is their job, and they should print his name. Does anybody believe if that was a whistleblower who was informing on, the other party, that his name wouldn't have been printed all over the place? Shoot, they'd already have a news crew on his front lawn, destroying the guy like they did to that poor little old lady. But no, well, we can't. He's got protections. He's a whistleblower. And let's be clear about something else. There are no protections for a whistleblower that keeps you from naming them. Whistleblower protections means they are free from retribution, not free from being named. They're not naming this person because the truth about who this person is ugly. The guy who started this whole Ukrainian mess, he's a Democrat operative. His whole history is working for the Democrats. Hillary and Schumer's lawyer worked for Joe Biden, worked for Brennan. The true nature of this guy, the true identity of this guy, it doesn't make the Democrats look very good. He's not some, just nonpartisan guy trying to do my job. He's a Democrat operative. Looks bad for Democrats. It looks really, really bad. Now, Donald Trump does this thing. Some people say it's on purpose. Some people say it's accidental, where he'll misspell words on Twitter. Or he'll go to a rally like this one last night and he'll use words that aren't really words. I want you to listen to what he said and then I'll tell you what he's doing.
The far left wants to impose their authoritarian ideology on the nation, telling you what to think, what to believe, and how you should live.
Authoritarian is obviously not a word. And of course, all the media pundits inside the Beltway, what a stupid idiot. Look at this uneducated moron. I can't believe people. Ladies and gentlemen, in politics, there is no ability like relatability. Now, I'm not in President Donald Trump's head. I don't know whether or not he does things like this on purpose. I would never pretend to know, but I will tell you this. The guys who win elections, the guys who decide elections, Rust Belt swing voters, union guys, iron workers, they hear him say something like that, and you know what they see? They see themselves. You know what else they see? They see the press mocking him for how he speaks, and they feel mocked. What do you mean? Oh, so what? He didn't go to Harvard. Doesn't matter that Donald Trump is a New York City billionaire. He has this ability, the way many other politicians in the past have, to relate to the blue-collar worker, the working class worker who actually decides elections. It's been a great benefit for him. Whether it's intentional or not, it works. Trump also obviously spoke about Baghdadi's death. I would get used to that because it's a winner for him.
The monstrous animal known as al-Baghdadi is dead. And the man that took his place is dead also. American Special Forces gave the world's #1 terrorist a one-way ticket to hell.
Yes, they certainly did. And it's also hilarious that it took ISIS a week to get out a statement, because the day after we killed Baghdadi, we killed their spokesman too. So that's too bad. But get used to Donald Trump using that at campaign rallies. Make no mistake about it. You heard the roar of the crowd. He has ears too. He heard the roar of that crowd. Talking about the death of Baghdadi is a winner. It is a political win for Donald Trump, which is part of the reason you saw such a concentrated media effort to tamp down the raid. Well, I mean, he was barely involved. Well, this happened in spite of him. He didn't even, this is more Obama's doing. Because they know it's a winner. It just is. Now, to talk about this and other things, our good friend Cam Edwards of BearingArms.com is coming up in just a second. Hang on. Donald Trump in rally mode? Well, look, he kills it in rally mode. He had this to say last night. Again, we just covered it, but before I bring on Cam Edwards, I want to play it for you again. Listen to what he had to say.
The far left wants to impose their authoritarian ideology on the nation, telling you what to think, what to believe, and how you should live.
To talk about that, bringing on my friend Cam Edwards of BearingArms.com. Cam, obviously authoritarian is not a word. I went to community college, and even I know that's not a word. And I have this theory. I don't know whether he does it on purpose or not. I have no idea, nor would I pretend to know. I think he misspells things in tweets. I think he uses words that aren't really words, and it makes him so much more relatable to the average everyday guy. I mean, as you well know, Cam, I grew up white trash in the Rust Belt. You know, and then I moved to Montana. Like, I grew up around normal construction guys, and I still talk to these guys. And when they hear him say things like that, they're not turned off. And you know what? When people look down their noses at him, you know, every journalist fact-checking him, they feel like the journalist is looking down on them, not Trump. Am I crazy?
No, I don't think you're crazy. Again, I don't know if it's intentional, but I certainly don't think that it hurts him among his base. And I think it provokes a lot of eye rolling. Again, when you see the grammar police come out and they want to police his spelling. Listen, I have a horrible habit of leaving out words when I'm tweeting. And it's always like the small words like of and like little propositions. I do that all the time. So, you know, when I see people going after Donald Trump for his tweets, it kind of annoys me, honestly, but it certainly doesn't make me think less of the president because, come on, it's the medium. And, you know, frankly, if you're getting caught up in, invented words or, misspelled words on a Twitter feed, you're missing, frankly, he probably loves it because you're missing his actual point and you're focusing on details that don't matter at all.
Oh, that is an absolute fact. And I have to be honest, Cam, I didn't even know the of and ands were actually called what did you call them? Proposition?
Prepositions?
I didn't know that's what they were.
See, I don't know.
See, I didn't even know that's what those were called. So I don't concern myself with things like reading or education.
We call them little tiny words, Jesse. That's what we call them. Just little tiny words.
Little
mini
tiny
words.
Hey, Cam, before we get back to the Trump rally, I did want to ask you about this horrible thing that took place in Mexico. The LeBaron family, 3 women, 6 kids massacred by the cartels in Mexico. And I realize this is not polite, but I floated a theory out there at the very beginning of the show, take it or leave it, that I want heads on pikes for this. And it's not necessarily a revenge thing. I think that you have to do some kind of public retribution for these things as a country to protect the rest of your citizens around the world. That touching an American citizen, whether it be a cartel or not, is a big-time no-go, and you will bring down the hand of God on you. I want heads on pikes buried in the sand as a message to everybody else on earth.
Well, unfortunately, you're not going to get that. But I don't even think you're going to see a military response from Mexico's president. His plan is literally hugs, not arms. And he wants to hug it out with the drug cartels. And that's simply not going to work. You are looking at multinational, multi-billion-dollar criminal enterprises. And I've seen folks say, well, what we need to do is we need to ban assault weapons so the cartels can't get them. That's absolutely ridiculous. We could ban every single firearm in America today. The cartels would not blink an eye. They're able to get whatever weaponry they want, including not, military-style semi-automatic firearms, but honest-to-goodness machine guns, anti-tank weapons, rocket-propelled grenades. This is a serious, very serious security situation that we have just to our south. And unfortunately, I don't think Mexico's new president is really dealing with this in a way that is going to make anything better anytime soon. I mean, it seems like he is just going, headlong in the opposite direction.
He is. I saw his statement in response to what President Trump put out about we need social programs, not a war with the cartels. And I about fell out of my chair. By the way, you mentioned how well the Mexican cartels are armed. Probably a decent time to point out the fact that the United States of America under Barack Obama and Eric Holder sold them half of those weapons, but that's another matter entirely. I encourage people to Google Fast and the Furious. Cam, what is the Cam Edwards plan for dealing with the cartels? Look, we do have at least half a failed narco state on our southern border. We have a massive border with them. Yes, they're a trade partner, but we're importing poison in the United States of America. We have 130 Americans dying every single day of opioid addiction. It's a real problem, but what is the solution? I mean, honestly, nobody wants to hear extreme solutions, and I say this tongue in cheek, but I mean, aside from invading Mexico, what do we do?
You know, so look, you've got the protectionist option, which is to enforce the border, right? And that's something that Donald Trump has actually talked about for several weeks now with Mexico's president. Better border security. Mexico supposedly would love it because it would supposedly mean fewer guns coming from the United States into Mexico, supposedly would mean fewer drugs coming from Mexico into the United States. The more interventionist policy would be to either provide military assistance to Mexico or, you know, look, I'm with you. We're not going to invade Mexico. Ideally, frankly, this is a multinational problem dealing with these drug cartels. So ideally, there'd be a multinational solution. I don't know. The sad thing is, though, I don't know that anything's going to be done. Ultimately, I think that we are dealing with a problem that is of a magnitude that a lot of politicians simply will run away from it, or they'll propose these, you know, do nothing measures like, well, let's just ban semi-automatic firearms in the United States, rather than actually tackle a really huge issue, which is, you know, the seven-headed hydra of drug cartels that are operating with near impunity, and frankly, in many places, may even be running their little portion of the country, like their own personal fiefdom, instead of the, you know, lawful Mexican government. How do you deal with that? Boy, I wish I knew.
Well, I wish I knew too. And by the way, it should be pointed out with what you just said about, you know, people don't want to solve the problem. I would argue that enough people's pockets are getting lined that there's a reason politicians don't ever take serious steps to solve the problem. I don't think nations want to solve the problem. They look and they're like, our people like drugs. Our people like cheap goods. Our people like cheap labor. I mean, we have to act like we care at campaign time, but we don't actually care. And look, as a gun guy, honestly the best gun expert I know, people don't want to hear this because it sounds like a right-wing talking point, but the best way to get your tiny Mexican town to keep it from being overrun by drug cartels would be an AR-15 in every home. That's the bottom line. Mexico has strict gun policies, and so the cartels come in and kick everybody around because nobody can defend themselves. I mean, there are plenty of examples out there of people being able to rise up and defend their own towns if you give them weapons.
Yeah, and that's a thing, actually, where you do have Mexican citizens who are in some cases violating Mexican law in owning these firearms, but they're doing so in order to protect their communities from the cartels. You're right. There's one gun store in all of Mexico. One. It's located on a military base in Mexico City. And the average Mexican citizen is allowed to own one handgun, I believe up to 9 rifles, but they can't be greater than .22 caliber. That's it. That's what you are allowed to own. Now, again, the cartels absolutely laugh at that. So what happens is you've got the cartels who are heavily armed. You've got the, in many cases, corrupt and in many more cases, inept Mexican security forces who are armed, but the state cannot protect those individuals. And you're right, Jesse. I believe that we've got a human right of self-defense. And Mexico's constitution allegedly protects the right to keep and bear arms. It is time to make that a reality for the good people who are unfortunately living under the thumb of these drug cartels.
A .22 caliber. I used to go squirrel hunting with a .22 caliber. Not exactly the kind of weaponry you need to combat RPGs down in Mexico. Now, Cam, Halloween is over. It is officially Thanksgiving season, and we'll address this more as we get closer. Are you, and I bet you are just because you're so boring, are you a turkey guy at Thanksgiving, Cam, or do you actually branch out and think for yourself?
I am a turkey guy. I prefer a smoked turkey. But I leave it up to my wife, man. She does all the cooking. So we've had turducken one year. She did some sort of pork dish. She'll branch out occasionally, but yeah, man, there's got to be the turkey. There has to be stuffing, has to be mashed potatoes and gravy, Parker House rolls. Like there are a few things that have to be on the table. Does that make me boring?
I don't understand why.
Or does that just make me a traditionalist?
It does make you boring, Cam. Why do we have to be traditionalists? Why do we have to be a slave to tradition? Have you ever, and be honest about this, be honest, ever, once in the last year, walked into a restaurant, picked up a menu, you got all these options, and said, ooh, I'll have the turkey? You haven't, and you know you haven't, don't lie.
Like hot turkey like you get at Thanksgiving or a turkey sandwich? I've had a turkey sandwich. But no, not the hot
But that
turkey. But
doesn't
you know
count.
why?
We're not
Because you
talking
save
cold
it for
cuts, Cam.
Thanksgiving. You save it for
Oh,
Thanksgiving. That's why.
Cam Edwards, BearingArms.com. Thank you, sir, for joining us again today.
Always good talking with you, Jesse. Thanks.
Be good, Cam. Coming right up, this Jeffrey Epstein thing gets uglier the longer he's dead. Now we have ABC News that apparently tried to run it and the story got squashed. Ooh, we'll tell you about it in a second. Well, the scandal and the stories behind billionaire pedophile, now dead billionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, it just keeps getting uglier by the day. The more we find out about him, the more we find out about his associations, the more we find out about his suicide, and the more we find out about how people covered up for him. And not just, the maid. We're talking major, powerful people, powerful publications who possessed information on the man while he was still out there allegedly raping his way across the globe, and they did nothing. Or they had information on him and other powerful people, and they did nothing. And word keeps coming down from on high that people were to stop. I want you to listen to this. This is from Project Veritas, and big props to them for getting this. This is ABC News reporter Amy Robach, caught on a hot mic. This is from 2016, and as you listen to her, I want you to remember what was going on in 2016. When you hear some of the names and some of the things she says, 2016 was the election year between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Listen very closely to this lady.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. And then Alan Dershowitz was also implicated in it because of the planes. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. She was in hiding for 12 years. We convinced her to come out. We convinced her to talk to us. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton. We had everything. I tried for 3 years to get it on, to no avail, and now it's all coming out, and it's like these new revelations, and I freaking had all of it. I'm so pissed right now. Like, every day I get more and more pissed because I'm just like, oh my God, what we had was unreal. Other women backing it up. Hey, yep. Brad Edwards, the attorney, 3 years ago, saying there will come a day when we will realize Jeffrey Epstein was the most prolific pedophile this country has ever known. And I had it all 3 years ago.
That is difficult to watch when you think about it through the lens of there was a powerful billionaire abusing young girls, and people knew about it, and they did nothing about it. Did nothing about it, allegedly, according to this reporter, so they could get an interview with the royal family because allegedly Prince Andrew was implicated. She said the words, we had Clinton. They had a lady who was in hiding for 12 years, apparently even had pictures. According to that, they had corroborating witnesses. They had everything a news organization needs to run with something. And the fact that they let it go. What are you there for? What are you there for as journalists, as a news organization? For all this bluster and talk about speaking truth to power. We're going to stand up to Donald Trump. Let's put a stop to it. You had information on a billionaire pedophile 3 years ago and quashed the story. And ABC News puts out some crap statement today. Not all of our reporting met our standards to air, but we have never stopped investigating the story, ever. Ever since we had a team on this investigation and substantial resources dedicated to it. What is that? What do you call that? That's dumb. It's ugly. And when you think about the implications behind it, it's hard to think. It's hard to picture. It's hard to picture. We're not talking about financial crimes here. Not that those are okay either. We're not talking about, Bernie Madoff. We're talking about scared young girls being abused by the most powerful men on earth. And if people really did stomp on that story because of threats or because they wanted to score an interview with somebody, shame on them. Shame on them. Pathetic. All right. We're going to be back to do it all again tomorrow. I know you have enjoyed watching I'm Right almost as much as I've enjoyed watching myself on the television tonight. See you then.